Nathan Drake's soul felt as empty as the desert that stretched endlessly before him. The sun beat down mercilessly on his weathered hat as he rode along the dusty trail, his once bright dreams now faded like the color of his denim shirt. It was 1876, 3 years since he'd lost everything that mattered in the world, and the bitter taste of that loss still lingered in his mouth like trail dust. His paint horse, Copper, trudged along the rutted path that snaked through the New Mexico territory. Nathan had been riding for weeks, putting distance between himself and the memories that haunted him back in Colorado. The war had taken his brother, typhoid had claimed his parents, and the mining accident had robbed him of his closest friend. At 32, he felt like an old man, hollowed out by grief. The afternoon heat shimmered across the landscape, distorting the horizon. Nathan reached for his canteen, taking a small sip of the tepid water. He'd been heading toward Silver Creek, a small settlement where an old army buddy had promised work at his ranch. It wasn't much of a future, but it was something to move toward, and movement was all Nathan had left. He crested a small rise and paused, scanning the empty road ahead. Something caught his eye, a splash of color against the dusty brown landscape. Squinting against the sun's glare, he made out what looked like a bundle of cloth beside the trail. As he drew closer, the bundle took shape, and Nathan's heart quickened. It was a woman, lying motionless beside an overturned wagon. "Whoa," he called softly to Copper, pulling back on the reins. The horse came to a stop, and Nathan dismounted carefully, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. Bandit attacks weren't uncommon on these lonely stretches of road, and this might be a trap. But as he approached, gun drawn, he saw no signs of anyone else around. Just a young woman, her dress torn and dirty, lying unconscious beside the broken remains of a small wagon. One wheel had completely shattered, and the contents of the wagon, a trunk, some bundles of clothing, and various household items lay scattered across the ground. Nathan knelt beside her, checking for signs of life. She was breathing, her chest rising and falling shallowly. Her face was streaked with dirt and dried blood from a cut on her forehead, but even through the grime, he could see she was beautiful. Dark auburn hair had come loose from its pins and framed a delicate face. She couldn't be more than 25. "Miss," he said, gently touching her shoulder. "Miss, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, then opened slowly, revealing eyes the color of a summer sky. For a moment, she stared at him in confusion, then fear flashed across her face and she tried to scramble away. "Easy now," Nathan said, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you. Found you here by the road. What happened?" The woman winced, touching the wound on her forehead. "The wheel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It broke. The wagon overturned." She looked around, confusion and fear evident in her expression. "I was thrown." "How long have I been here?" "Can't say," Nathan replied, reaching for his canteen. "Here, take a drink, slowly now." She accepted the canteen with trembling hands, taking a small sip before returning it. "Thank you. I'm Delia Montgomery, Nathan Drake," he replied. "Where were you headed, Miss Montgomery?" "Silver Creek," she said, attempting to sit up more fully. "I have family there, or at least I hope I do. My uncle owns a store in town." Nathan helped her to a sitting position, noticing her wince of pain. "Are you hurt elsewhere?" "My ankle," she admitted. "I think it might be broken, and please call me Delia." Nathan gently examined her ankle, which was already swollen and bruised. "Not broken, I don't think, but badly sprained for sure. You can't walk on this." He glanced around at the wreckage of her wagon, noting that there was no horse to be seen. "Your horse gets spooked and run off," Delia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Old Bessie. She was all I had left from home." "Where's home?" Nathan asked, beginning to gather some of her scattered belongings. "Boston," she replied, watching him work. "There's nothing left for me there now. My parents died last winter, influenza." Nathan nodded, understanding all too well the hollow feeling of being the last one left. "I'm headed to Silver Creek myself," he said. "I can take you there." Relief washed over her face, quickly followed by wariness. "That's very kind, but I couldn't impose, and I don't know you, Mr. Drake." "Nathan," he corrected. "And out here, a person alone doesn't last long. Especially not injured and without transportation." He gestured to the vast emptiness surrounding them. Next traveler might not be as honorable in his intentions. Delia seemed to consider this, then nodded slowly. You're right, of course. I would be grateful for your help, Nathan. We should get moving before dark, he said, eyeing the sun's position in the sky. I'll salvage what I can of your things, but we'll have to travel light. He helped Delia to her feet, supporting her as she hobbled to a flat rock where she could sit while he worked. Nathan quickly sorted through her belongings, selecting the most essential items that could be easily carried on horseback. The trunk was too heavy, but he managed to secure her clothing bundle and a small satchel that seemed to contain personal items. I'm sorry about the rest, he said, noticing her distressed expression as she looked at the abandoned possessions. They're just things, she replied quietly, though her voice betrayed her emotions. I should be grateful to be alive. The sun was dipping lower when Nathan finally helped Delia onto Copper's back. The horse snorted in protest at the additional weight, but Nathan patted his neck reassuringly. It's all right, boy, we'll take it slow. Nathan mounted behind her, acutely aware of her body pressed against his as he reached around to take the reins. It had been years since he'd been this close to a woman, and the scent of her hair somehow still carrying traces of lavender, despite her ordeal stirred something long dormant within him. Are you comfortable enough? He asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Yes, thank you, she replied softly. They rode in silence for a time, the rhythmic sound of Copper's hooves on the hard, packed earth the only sound besides the occasional desert bird call. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. We should make camp soon, Nathan said eventually. There's a spot near a creek about half an hour ahead. We can rest there for the night and continue to Silver Creek in the morning. Delia nodded, fatigue evident in the slump of her shoulders. I'm sorry to slow your journey. Don't be, Nathan replied simply. The campsite was a small clearing near a trickling creek, sheltered by a stand of cottonwood trees. Nathan helped Delia down from Copper, setting her gently on a flat rock while he went about making camp. He unsaddled the horse, letting him drink from the creek before securing him where he could graze on the sparse grass. Years of living on the trail had made Nathan efficient at setting up camp. He quickly gathered wood for a fire, arranged stones in a circle, and had flames crackling in no time. From his saddlebags, he produced jerky, hardtack, and coffee, a meager dinner, but sustaining. It's not much, he apologized, handing Delia a portion. It's more than I would have had otherwise, she replied with a small smile that transformed her face, momentarily erasing the fatigue and worry lines. Nathan found himself staring and quickly looked away, focusing on preparing his own meal. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped rapidly, as it always did in the desert. Nathan noticed Delia shivering and retrieved a blanket from his pack, draping it around her shoulders. Thank you, she said, pulling it close. For everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along. Nathan nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. No, Delia said firmly. Not anyone. The world isn't so kind, I've learned. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on their faces. In its warm glow, Nathan could see the strength in Delia's delicate features, a determination that spoke of someone who had faced hardship and persevered. What's in Silver Creek for you? She asked, breaking the silence. Nathan poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks rise into the night sky. Work. An old friend from my army days has a ranch there, offered me a job breaking horses. You were in the army, cavalry, during the war and after, fighting in the Indian campaigns. He spoke matter-of-factly, not mentioning the nightmares that still haunted him from those days. Delia seemed to sense there was more to the story but didn't press. Instead, she said, my uncle owns the general store in Silver Creek. At least, he did when I last heard from him. Uncle Walter Montgomery, do you know of him? Nathan shook his head. Never been to Silver Creek before. He's the only family I have left, she admitted, her voice small against the vast night. I wrote to him after my parents died, and he sent money for me to come west. Said I could help in the store and make a new start. It's hard, Nathan said after a moment, starting over. Their eyes met across the fire, an understanding passing between them. They were both adrift, clinging to whatever fragments of hope remained. We should get some sleep, Nathan said, breaking the moment. "We've got a long ride tomorrow." He arranged his bedroll for Delia near the fire, insisting she take it while he made do with his saddle as a pillow and his coat as a blanket. Despite her protests, she was asleep almost as soon as she lay down, the events of the day taking their toll. Nathan stayed awake longer, watching the stars wheel overhead and listening to the night sounds of the desert. Occasionally, his gaze would drift to Delia's sleeping form, and something would tighten in his chest, a feeling he couldn't name and wasn't sure he wanted to. Dawn broke with the harsh clarity that was unique to the desert, painting the landscape in gold and rose before giving way to the relentless blue of the sky. Nathan had been up before first light, rekindling the fire and brewing coffee. The rich aroma filled the air, and he noticed Delia stirring. "Morning," he said, pouring a cup of the strong black liquid as she sat up, wincing slightly. "Good morning," she replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Her hair was tousled from sleep, and without thinking, Nathan reached out to brush a strand from her face. His fingers grazed her cheek, and he pulled back quickly as though burned. "Sorry," he muttered, turning away to pack up his meager belongings. Delia touched the spot where his fingers had been, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "How's my ankle look?" she asked, changing the subject. Nathan knelt to examine it, careful to maintain a respectful distance. The swelling had gone down somewhat, but the bruising had darkened to an angry purple. "Better, but you still shouldn't put weight on it. We'll take it slow today." After a breakfast of the remaining jerky, Nathan helped Delia onto Copper once more, then mounted behind her. The day promised to be hot, with not a cloud in the sky to offer respite from the sun. "How far to Silver Creek?" Delia asked as they set off. "Should make it by nightfall if we keep a steady pace," Nathan replied. They rode in companionable silence for a time, the landscape slowly changing around them. The sparse desert gave way to more rolling terrain, with patches of grass and the occasional cluster of trees marking the presence of underground water. "Tell me about Boston," Nathan said eventually, curious about the life Delia had left behind. She was quiet for so long that he thought she might not answer, but then she began to speak, her voice taking on a wistful quality. "It's nothing like this. Always busy, always noisy. Streets crowded with people and carriages. In winter, everything is covered in snow, and in spring, the public garden blooms with every flower you can imagine." "Sounds nice," Nathan commented. "It was," Delia agreed. "But after my parents died, it didn't feel like home anymore. The house was too empty, too full of memories." She sighed. "I taught at a small school for girls. I loved my students, but the headmistress was difficult. When Uncle Walter's letter came, it seemed like a sign." "You're a teacher?" Nathan asked, surprised. Delia laughed softly. "Don't sound so shocked." "Yes, I taught literature and penmanship to young ladies." "What did you think I did?" Nathan shrugged, though she couldn't see the gesture. "Hadn't really thought about it. You just seem different from the schoolmarms I've known." "Different how?" Now it was Nathan's turn to laugh. "Well, for one, none of them would have survived being stranded in the desert overnight." "I'm tougher than I look," Delia said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm beginning to see that," he replied. As the day wore on, the sun beat down mercilessly. Nathan shared the water from his canteen sparingly, knowing they needed to make it last. By midday, they stopped in the shade of a large rock formation to rest Copper and eat some of the food Nathan had packed. Delia's face was flushed from the heat, and Nathan noticed how her dress, designed for the cooler climate of Boston, was wholly unsuitable for the desert. Sweat dampened the fabric at her neck and back. "Here," he said, offering her his bandana. "Wet it in the canteen and put it around your neck. It'll help cool you down." She did as he suggested, sighing with relief as the damp cloth touched her skin. "Thank you. I never imagined it could be so hot." "The desert's unforgiving," Nathan said. "Beautiful but deadly if you don't respect it. Is that why you came west?" Delia asked, studying him with those clear blue eyes. "For the beauty of it." Nathan looked away, focusing on retying his saddlebags. "No, came out here after the war, couldn't settle back into normal life back east." "And is your life normal now?" The question caught him off guard. Was his life normal? Drifting from town to town, taking whatever work he could find, never staying in one place long enough to form attachments. It wasn't normal, but it was all he knew how to do anymore. "It's what I've got," he replied finally. They continued their journey as the afternoon waned, the terrain becoming more varied as they approached Silver Creek. In the distance, mountains rose blue against the sky and the vegetation grew thicker, suggesting more reliable water sources. It was late afternoon when they heard the sound of approaching riders. Nathan tensed, his hand moving to his revolver. In these parts, strangers could mean trouble. "Get down," he instructed Delia, helping her slide off Copper before dismounting himself. He led the horse and Delia behind a large boulder, just as 3 riders appeared on the trail ahead. They were rough-looking men, unshaven and dirty, with the hard eyes of those who lived outside the law. Nathan recognized their type immediately: bandits who preyed on travelers in these remote areas. "Stay quiet," he whispered to Delia, who nodded, fear evident in her eyes. The men rode slowly, scanning the landscape as if searching for something or someone. One of them, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, pointed in their direction and said something to his companions. They changed course, heading straight for the boulder where Nathan and Delia were hiding. Nathan knew they couldn't outrun the men, not with both of them on one tired horse and Delia injured. They'd have to stand their ground. "When I tell you," he said quietly to Delia, "I want you to take Copper and ride as hard as you can towards Silver Creek. Follow the trail, don't stop for anything." "I'm not leaving you," she protested. "Yes, you are," Nathan replied firmly. "I'll be right behind you." Before she could argue further, the riders came around the boulder. Nathan stepped forward, positioning himself between them and Delia, his hand resting casually near his gun. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he said, his voice even. The scarred man spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the ground. "Well, what do we have here? A man and his woman all alone on the trail." "We're just passing through," Nathan replied calmly. "Heading to Silver Creek." "Silver Creek's a fair piece away," said another of the men, a thin fellow with a patchy beard. "Dangerous country between here and there. All sorts of accidents can happen." "We'll take our chances," Nathan said. The third man, who had been silent until now, nudged his horse forward slightly. He was younger than the others, with cold eyes that assessed Delia in a way that made Nathan's blood boil. "Pretty lady you got there," the young man said. "Might be safer if she rode with us instead." Nathan's hand moved to his gun, and in an instant, the atmosphere changed from tense to dangerous. The 3 men also reached for their weapons, creating a standoff. "Now, there's no need for this to get unfriendly," the scarred man said, though his hand remained on his holstered pistol. "We're just offering our assistance. For a price, of course." "We don't need your help," Nathan replied, "and we don't have anything worth taking." The scarred man laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the rocks. "Everyone's got something worth taking, friend." Nathan calculated his odds. 3 against 1 weren't good, but he'd faced worse. The key was to create an opportunity for Delia to escape. "Delia," he said quietly, not taking his eyes off the men, "get on Copper." She hesitated, but when he shot her a fierce look, she began to move slowly toward the horse. The young bandit noticed and drew his gun. "She ain't going nowhere," he snarled. What happened next was a blur of motion. Nathan drew and fired in one fluid movement, hitting the young man in the shoulder. As he fell from his horse, Nathan dove for cover behind the boulder, pulling Delia with him as bullets whizzed overhead. "Go," he shouted, practically throwing her onto Copper's back. "Now." This time she didn't argue. She grabbed the reins and dug her heels into the horse's sides, and Copper took off down the trail, away from the gunfire. Nathan provided cover, exchanging shots with the remaining 2 bandits from behind the boulder. One of the men broke away, spurring his horse after Delia. Nathan took careful aim and fired, catching the man in the back. He toppled from his saddle, landing hard on the ground and not moving again. The scarred man, seeing his companions down, retreated behind a stand of rocks. For a few moments, there was silence, broken only by the distant sound of Copper's hooves fading away. "You're a dead man," the bandit shouted. "Nobody crosses Jeb Harker and lives to tell about it." Nathan didn't respond, conserving his ammunition and listening intently for any movement. He had 4 bullets left and needed to make them count. A shot rang out, the bullet chipping stone near Nathan's head. He ducked lower, trying to pinpoint the shooter's location. Another shot, closer this time. Harker was moving, trying to flank him. Nathan waited, counting silently. When he reached 5, he rolled to his right, away from where he'd been sheltering, just as another bullet struck where he'd been moments before. In the split second after the shot, he rose to one knee and fired twice in quick succession. A cry of pain told him at least one bullet had found its mark. Nathan didn't wait to see the result. He broke from cover and ran in a zigzag pattern toward where the men's horses were nervously stamping. A final shot whistled past his ear, but then he was mounting one of the horses, a skittish bay that reared before responding to his firm hand on the reins. He spurred the horse in the direction Delia had gone, not looking back. The bay was fresh and fast, eating up the distance quickly. Within minutes, he caught sight of Copper ahead, with Delia clinging to his back, her auburn hair flying out behind her. "Delia," he called, drawing alongside. "It's me," she turned, relief flooding her face when she saw him. "Nathan, are you hurt?" "I'm fine," he assured her, though his heart was still pounding from the close call. "But we need to keep moving. Harker might have friends nearby." They rode hard for the next hour, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the site of the gunfight. Copper was tiring, so Nathan suggested they switch horses, helping Delia onto the bay while he took the reins of his own mount. The sun was setting by the time they slowed their pace, the immediate danger seemingly behind them. In the gathering dusk, Nathan could make out buildings in the distance, the outskirts of Silver Creek. "We made it," Delia said, her voice filled with wonder and exhaustion. Nathan nodded, surveying the small town that lay ahead. A single main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest, wisps of smoke from chimneys curling into the evening sky. It looked peaceful, ordinary, a stark contrast to the violence they'd just escaped. "Your uncle's store," he said. "Do you know where it is?" "He said it was on Main Street," Delia replied. "Montgomery's general store." They rode slowly into town, aware of the curious glances from townsfolk still out and about in the evening hours. A woman sweeping her porch stopped to stare at them, while a group of men outside the saloon fell silent as they passed. Nathan knew what they must look like: dirty, disheveled, Delia's dress torn and bloodstained, both of them riding as if the devil himself were on their heels. Main Street was easy enough to find, being the primary thoroughfare through the small settlement. Nathan scanned the storefronts as they rode, looking for Montgomery's. They passed a blacksmith shop, a barber, the sheriff's office, and finally, near the end of the street, a large storefront with Montgomery's general store painted in neat letters across the front. A bell jingled as they entered, the store empty of customers at this late hour. Behind the counter stood a portly, middle-aged man with side whiskers and spectacles perched on his nose. He looked up at the sound of the bell, his expression changing from polite interest to shock as he took in their appearance. "Uncle Walter?" Delia asked tentatively. The man stared at her for a long moment, then removed his spectacles slowly. "Delia, is that you, child?" "Yes, it's me," she replied, her voice breaking with emotion. Walter Montgomery came around the counter quickly, his face a picture of concern. "Good heavens, what happened to you?" "Your letter said you'd arrive on yesterday's stage. When you didn't show, I was beside myself with worry. The stagecoach was full," Delia explained. "I had to wait for the next one, but then there was trouble with bandits. The driver was killed, and I barely escaped with a wagon and some of my things. But then the wheel broke, and I was stranded until Nathan found me." Walter turned his attention to Nathan, seeming to notice him for the first time. "You saved my niece." Nathan shifted uncomfortably under the man's scrutiny. "Just happened to be riding by, sir." "He's being modest," Delia said. "He not only rescued me from the desert, but also protected me from bandits who tried to attack us on the road here. I owe him my life." Walter's expression softened, and he extended his hand to Nathan. "Then I am in your debt, Mr. Drake, Nathan Drake. Mr. Drake, you are welcome in my home for as long as you wish to stay. It's the least I can do to repay your kindness to my niece." Before Nathan could respond, the door to the store opened again, and a tall man with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest entered. He surveyed the scene with sharp eyes, taking in Nathan's gun belt and the general state of disarray. "Everything all right here, Walter?" The sheriff asked, his hand resting casually near his own weapon. "Perfectly fine, Sheriff Brooks," Walter replied. "My niece has finally arrived, though she's had quite an ordeal getting here. This gentleman, Mr. Drake, helped her reach Silver Creek safely." The sheriff's gaze lingered on Nathan, assessing him. "That right?" Nathan met his gaze steadily. "Yes, sir. There was trouble on the road," Delia added. "Bandits. One of them called himself Jeb Harker." At the mention of Harker's name, the sheriff's expression darkened. "Harker's gang has been terrorizing travelers for months. Where did you encounter them?" "About 3 hours' ride east," Nathan replied. "There were 3 of them. 2 won't be causing any more trouble." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "You took down 2 of Harker's men." "Had no choice," Nathan said simply. Sheriff Brooks studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "I'll need a full statement from both of you tomorrow. For now, though, it looks like you could use some rest and a hot meal." He tipped his hat to Delia. "Welcome to Silver Creek, Miss Montgomery. Sorry your arrival wasn't more peaceful." After the sheriff left, Walter closed up the store and led them through a door at the back that connected to his living quarters, a comfortable home with a parlor, kitchen, and several bedrooms upstairs. "Delia, you'll have the blue room that belonged to your aunt. God rest her soul," Walter said. "Mr. Drake, I insist you stay as well. The spare room is small but clean." Nathan started to protest, but Walter waved him off. "I won't hear of you staying elsewhere, not after what you've done for my niece." A plump woman named Mrs. Abernathy, who Walter explained was his housekeeper, fussed over Delia's injuries and prepared a hearty meal while they cleaned up. By the time they sat down to eat, Nathan felt almost human again. Though every muscle in his body ached from the long ride and the fight over dinner, Delia recounted their journey in more detail, her voice growing stronger as she described their escape from Harker's men. Walter listened with wide eyes, occasionally glancing at Nathan with newfound respect. "Well," Walter said when she had finished, "it seems Silver Creek has gained not only a new resident in my niece but also a hero in Mr. Drake." Nathan shook his head. "I'm no hero, Mr. Montgomery. Just happened to be in the right place at the right time." "Nonsense," Walter insisted. "You risked your life for a stranger. That's the very definition of heroism in my book." He turned to Delia. "And you, my dear, have shown remarkable courage. Your parents would be proud." Delia's eyes glistened at the mention of her parents, but she smiled. "Thank you, Uncle Walter. I'm just grateful to be here safely." Later, as Nathan was shown to the spare room, Delia caught his arm in the hallway. "Thank you again," she said softly, "for everything." In the lamplight, her eyes were the deepest blue he'd ever seen, and for a moment, Nathan couldn't speak. He simply nodded, acutely aware of her hand on his arm and the scent of lavender that somehow still clung to her hair. "Good night, Nathan," she said, releasing his arm and turning toward her own room. "Good night, Delia," he replied, watching her go before entering the small, neat room that would be his for the night. As he lay in bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, Nathan thought about the events that had brought him to Silver Creek. He'd come seeking nothing more than work away to keep moving, to outrun the emptiness inside him. Instead, he'd found Delia Montgomery, abandoned and in need, and something in him had responded to that need in a way he hadn't expected. It was temporary, he told himself. Tomorrow, he would seek out his friend's ranch and the job that awaited him. Delia was safe with her uncle now. She didn't need Nathan Drake anymore. And yet, as sleep finally claimed him, her face was the last thing he saw in his mind's eye. Morning brought the sounds of a town coming to life, wagons rattling down the street, shopkeepers opening their businesses, children laughing as they ran to school. Nathan woke early, habit ingrained from years on the trail, and found the kitchen already occupied by Mrs. Abernathy, who was preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Mr. Drake," she said cheerfully. "Coffee's hot if you want some." Nathan accepted a cup gratefully, savoring the rich aroma. "Thank you, madam. You're up early," she observed, turning bacon in a cast-iron skillet. "Most folks sleep in after the kind of day you had yesterday. Old habits," Nathan replied with a shrug. Mrs. Abernathy nodded knowingly. "Mr. Montgomery will be down shortly. He always checks the store inventory before breakfast." Miss Delia, though, she might sleep a bit longer. Poor dear was exhausted. As if on cue, Walter Montgomery entered the kitchen, already dressed for the day in a clean shirt and vest. "Ah, Mr. Drake, I hope you slept well. Better than I have in months," Nathan admitted. "Thank you for your hospitality." Walter waved away his thanks. "It's the least I could do. Now tell me what brings you to Silver Creek besides rescuing damsels in distress." Nathan smiled slightly at the description. "Work. An old army friend, James Hartley, has a ranch outside town, said he could use a good horsebreaker." Walter's eyebrows rose. "Hartley's place, that's one of the biggest spreads in the territory. You know horses, then?" "Been around them all my life," Nathan replied. "Worked as a wrangler before the war and after when I could find the work." "Well, Hartley's always looking for good men," Walter said. "Though I must say, I was hoping you might consider staying in town for a while. I could use a strong back in the store, especially with new shipments coming in next week." Nathan was surprised by the offer. "That's generous, but I don't know anything about store keeping." "It's not so different from any other work," Walter said. "You learn as you go, and the pay is steady with room and board included." He looked at Nathan thoughtfully. "Think about it at least. No need to decide right away." Before Nathan could respond, Delia appeared in the doorway, looking refreshed despite the bandage still visible on her forehead. She wore a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, her hair neatly pinned up. "Good morning," she said, smiling at the assembled company. Nathan found himself standing, an automatic gesture of respect that made Walter's eyes twinkle with amusement. "Good morning, Miss Montgomery," Nathan said formally. "I thought we were past such formalities, Nathan," Delia replied, taking a seat at the table. "After all, you've seen me at my worst already." Mrs. Abernathy served breakfast bacon, eggs, and biscuits with gravy, and for a while, conversation was limited to appreciation of the food. Nathan couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten so well, and he thanked the housekeeper profusely. "Will you be staying in Silver Creek long?" Delia asked Nathan as they finished their meal. He glanced at Walter, then back to Delia. "Not sure yet. Came here for work at Hartley's ranch, but your uncle has made a generous offer for me to help at the store instead." "Oh," Delia's face brightened. "That would be wonderful. I mean," she added, a slight blush coloring her cheeks, "it would be nice to have you nearby after everything we've been through together." Nathan felt something stir in his chest at her words, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. "I'll think on it," he promised. After breakfast, Nathan and Delia made their way to the sheriff's office as requested. Sheriff Brooks took their statements about the encounter with Harker's gang, his face grim as they recounted the details. "You're lucky to be alive," he told them when they had finished. "Harker doesn't usually leave witnesses." "Will he come after us?" Delia asked, concern evident in her voice. The sheriff sighed. "Hard to say. Harker's not one to forget a slight, but he might think twice about coming into town. We've got a deputy stationed at each end of Main Street, and most folks here are armed and tired of Harker's reign of terror." "I'll keep an eye out," Nathan promised. Thinking of Delia's safety, Sheriff Brooks gave him an appraising look. "You handled yourself well out there, Drake." "Ever consider wearing a badge?" Nathan shook his head. "No, sir. I've seen enough fighting to last a lifetime." "Fair enough," the sheriff replied. "But if you change your mind, let me know. Could use a man with your skills." When they left the sheriff's office, Delia insisted on showing Nathan around Silver Creek, despite her still tender ankle. The town was small but growing, with new buildings going up on the outskirts and a general air of prosperity. "Uncle Walter says Silver Creek is booming because of the silver mines in the mountains," Delia explained as they walked. "New people arriving every week, he says." They passed the school, a small building with children's voices drifting through the open windows. Delia paused, listening with a wistful expression. "Do you miss teaching?" Nathan asked. She nodded. "I do. There's something special about watching a child learn, seeing that moment when understanding dawns." She glanced at the schoolhouse again. "I wonder if they need another teacher here." "Why don't you ask?" Delia looked uncertain. "I wouldn't want to impose. Uncle Walter expects me to help in the store." "I suspect your uncle wants whatever will make you happy," Nathan replied. "He seems that kind of man." They continued their tour, stopping at various shops and introducing Nathan to townsfolk Delia had already met. Everywhere they went, people were friendly, welcoming Delia to Silver Creek and thanking Nathan for bringing her safely to town. By midday, they had completed their circuit and returned to Montgomery's general store. Walter was busy with customers but waved them toward the back room, where Mrs. Abernathy had prepared a light lunch. "I should go see about that ranch job," Nathan said as they ate. "Hartley will be wondering where I am." Delia's face fell slightly, but she nodded. "Of course, will you come back and let us know how it goes?" "Sure," Nathan promised, though he wasn't certain it was wise. The more time he spent with Delia, the harder it would be to leave, and leaving was what Nathan Drake did best. Stay too long in one place, and the ghosts caught up with you. That had been his experience. After lunch, Nathan retrieved Copper from the livery stable where they had left the horses the night before. The stable boy had groomed him well, and the paint looked rested and ready for the ride to Hartley's ranch. Which way to Hartley's place? Nathan asked the stable master, an older man with gnarled hands and a weathered face. "Follow the main road west out of town for about 5 miles, the man replied. "Can't miss it, big white house on a hill, with the largest barn in the territory." Nathan thanked him and mounted Copper, turning the horse toward the western edge of town. As he rode past Montgomery's store, he glanced up and saw Delia watching from an upstairs window. She raised her hand in farewell, and Nathan touched the brim of his hat in response before spurring Copper forward. The ride to Hartley's ranch was pleasant, the road well-maintained and the landscape greener than what Nathan had seen in months of desert travel. Fields of wheat and corn stretched to the horizon, interspersed with pastures where cattle grazed contentedly. It was good country, rich and fertile, the kind of land men fought over. True to the stable master's directions, Nathan couldn't miss the Hartley ranch. The main house stood proud on a small rise, a 2-story white building with a wide porch and dormer windows. Below it sprawled the ranch buildings, a massive barn, bunkhouse, corrals, and various outbuildings. Men on horseback moved among a herd of cattle in a distant field, while closer at hand, someone was working with a horse in a round pen. As Nathan approached, a man emerged from the barn, tall and broad-shouldered, with a shock of gray hair and a face Nathan would have recognized anywhere. "James Hartley," Nathan called, dismounting as the man looked his way. "Been a long time." Hartley squinted at him for a moment, then his face broke into a wide grin. "Nathan Drake, as I live and breathe, was beginning to think you weren't coming." The two men shook hands warmly. They had served together in the cavalry, had saved each other's lives more than once during skirmishes with hostile tribes. After the war, they had gone their separate ways, Hartley to build his ranch, Nathan to wander, unable to settle. "Got delayed on the road," Nathan explained. "Found a woman stranded with a broken wagon, had to help her to town." "Always the knight in tarnished armor," Hartley chuckled. "Come on in, we've got catching up to do." Inside the main house, which was as impressive within as without, Hartley introduced Nathan to his wife, Sarah, a handsome woman with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She insisted on feeding him, despite his protests that he'd already eaten, and soon Nathan found himself at the Hartley's dining table with a plate of cold chicken and biscuits before him. "So, you're finally ready to put down roots?" Hartley asked as they ate. Nathan hesitated. "Not sure about roots, just need steady work for a while." Hartley exchanged a glance with his wife. "Well, I've got plenty of that. Need someone to break the new stock we bought at auction last month. 20 head of Mustangs, wild as the wind. Think you can handle that?" "I can handle it," Nathan assured him. "Pays $40 a month plus room and board in the bunkhouse," Hartley continued. "More if you decide to take on other responsibilities. I could use a foreman with your experience." It was a generous offer, more than Nathan had expected. The work would be hard but satisfying, and Hartley was a fair man to work for. It was exactly what Nathan had come to Silver Creek seeking, so why did he feel hesitant? Delia's face flashed in his mind, her smile, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of teaching, the quiet strength she'd shown throughout their ordeal. He remembered Walter Montgomery's offer of work at the store in town, where he would see Delia every day. Something wrong with the terms? Hartley asked, noticing Nathan's distraction. No, the terms are fine, Nathan replied quickly. I've got another offer to consider as well, in town. Hartley's eyebrows rose. You've been in Silver Creek one day and already have multiple job offers. Times must be changing. Nathan explained about Walter Montgomery and the store, watching Hartley's expression change from surprise to understanding. Ah, Hartley said, a knowing look in his eyes. And I'm guessing this stranded woman you helped has something to do with your interest in staying in town. Nathan felt heat rise to his face, something that hadn't happened in years. It's not like that. I just promised I'd let them know my decision. Of course, Hartley replied, though his tone suggested he didn't believe Nathan for a moment. Tell you what, take a couple of days to think it over. The job here will be waiting if you want it. Despite Nathan's protests, Hartley insisted on sending him back to town with a fresh horse copper could rest in the Hartley stables until Nathan's return and a message for the general store. We need supplies anyway, Hartley said. You might as well make yourself useful. By the time Nathan rode back into Silver Creek, the sun was setting, painting the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold. The town had a different feel in the evening, more relaxed, with people strolling the boardwalks, music drifting from the saloon, and the scent of cooking fires filling the air. Montgomery's store was still open, though the hour was late. Nathan tied up his horse and entered, the familiar bell announcing his arrival. Walter was behind the counter, tallying the day's receipts while Delia was arranging a display of fabric near the window. She looked up at the sound of the bell, her face brightening when she saw Nathan. "You're back," she exclaimed, then composed herself, adding more calmly, "How was your visit to the ranch? Productive," Nathan replied, handing Walter the list Hartley had given him. "James sends his regards and a supply order." Walter scanned the list. "Quite an order." "The Hartleys must be planning something big. Cattle drive next month," Nathan explained. "They're gathering supplies early." "And the job?" Delia asked, her fingers playing nervously with a fold of calico fabric. "Did you accept it?" Nathan glanced between her and Walter, aware that his answer mattered to both of them, though for different reasons. "Hartley gave me a few days to decide," he said finally. "The offer's good, $40 a month breaking horses." "That is good," Walter agreed. "More than I could pay you here, I'm afraid." "Money's not everything," Nathan found himself saying, surprising even himself. When had Nathan Drake, drifter and loner, started caring about something besides the next paycheck? The bell jingled again, and Sheriff Brooks entered, looking harried. "Walter Drake," he acknowledged with a nod. "Miss Montgomery." "What brings you here so late, Sheriff?" Walter asked. Brooks ran a hand over his face, fatigue evident in every line of his body. "Bad news, I'm afraid. Got word from a rancher to the East Harker's on the move, and he's got more men with him now. Word is, he's headed this way." Delia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Nathan instinctively moved closer to her, his body tensing at the mention of Harker's name. "How many men?" Nathan asked. "Reports say at least 10, Brooks replied grimly. "And they're not just raiding travelers anymore. They hit a small settlement yesterday, burned half of it to the ground." Walter paled. "You think they'll attack Silver Creek?" "Can't say for certain," the sheriff said. "But I'm not taking chances. I'm organizing a town meeting tonight at the church, gathering volunteers to help defend the town if necessary." "I'll be there," Nathan said immediately. Brooks nodded. "Figured as much. Meetings in an hour." He turned to leave, then paused. "Drake, I know you said you weren't interested in a badge, but I could use someone with your experience. Deputy position's open if you want it." Nathan hesitated, caught off guard by the offer. "Let me think on it," he said finally. After the sheriff left, Walter locked the store's front door and turned the sign to closed. "We should get ready for the meeting," he said. "Mrs. Abernathy left some stew keeping warm on the stove. We should eat before we go." In the kitchen, as they ate quickly, Delia was uncharacteristically quiet. Nathan noticed her hands trembling slightly as she held her spoon. "You all right?" he asked softly. She looked up, her blue eyes shadowed with worry. "I can't help feeling responsible. If I hadn't come to Silver Creek, Harker wouldn't be targeting the town." "You don't know that's why he's coming," Nathan pointed out. And even if it is, the blame lies with Harker, not you. Nathan's right, Walter added firmly. Harker's a scourge on this territory. It was only a matter of time before he set his sights on Silver Creek. Delia didn't look convinced, but she nodded, finishing her stew in silence. The church was packed when they arrived, townspeople filling the pews and standing along the walls. Sheriff Brooks stood at the pulpit, with a map of the surrounding territory spread out before him. He acknowledged their arrival with a nod, then raised his hands for silence. "Folks," he began, his voice carrying to the back of the room, "I won't sugarcoat this. Jeb Harker and his gang are heading this way, and they mean business. They've been raiding smaller settlements to the east, and now it seems they've set their sights on Silver Creek." A murmur of fear rippled through the crowd. "Now, we've got two choices," Brooks continued. "We can wait for them to hit us, or we can prepare. I'm for preparing. I need volunteers to help patrol the town, keep watch from the rooftops, and if necessary, fight." Several men immediately raised their hands, including Walter. Nathan noticed most were older, veterans of the war like himself. The younger men seemed more hesitant. "Drake here," Brooks said, gesturing to Nathan, "has already had a run-in with Harker's gang and came out on top. He'll be helping coordinate our defense." All eyes turned to Nathan, who shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. He hadn't agreed to any such role, but looking at the worried faces around him, he couldn't bring himself to refuse. "I'll do what I can," he said simply. The meeting continued, with Brooks outlining a plan to fortify the town barricades at each end of Main Street, lookouts posted day and night, women and children to shelter in the church if an attack came. Volunteers were organized into shifts, weapons were inventoried, and by the end of the hour, Silver Creek had transformed from a peaceful settlement into a town preparing for war. As the meeting broke up, Nathan found himself surrounded by men asking questions about Harker, how many men he had, what weapons they carried, their usual tactics. Nathan answered as best he could, though his encounter had been brief and chaotic. Eventually, the crowd thinned, leaving just Nathan, Delia, Walter, and Sheriff Brooks in the church. "Thanks for stepping up, Drake," Brooks said, extending his hand. "Town needs men like you right now." Nathan shook the offered hand, "Just doing what needs doing." "That deputy position is still open," Brooks reminded him. "Pays not much, but it's steady work." Before Nathan could respond, Walter interjected, "You'd make a fine lawman, Nathan, and it would mean you could stay in Silver Creek permanently." "Uncle Walter," Delia protested, blushing. "Nathan will make his own decisions about where to settle." Nathan looked between them, feeling the weight of expectation. "I'll let you know tomorrow, Sheriff," he said finally. "Got some thinking to do first." They walked back to Walter's home in silence, the night air cool and clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. The town seemed eerily quiet, most residents having hurried home after the meeting to secure their properties and prepare for whatever might come. At the house, Mrs. Abernathy had left a lamp burning in the parlor and had retired to her own quarters. Walter excused himself shortly after they arrived, claiming fatigue, though Nathan suspected he was giving them privacy. Alone in the parlor, Delia sat on the settee, her hands folded in her lap. Nathan remained standing, too restless to sit. "What will you do?" Delia asked finally, breaking the silence. "About the deputy position, I mean." Nathan moved to the window, looking out at the darkened street. "Not sure, never saw myself as a lawman, but you'd be good at it," Delia said softly. "You're brave and you have a strong sense of justice. I saw that when you defended me against Harker's men." Nathan turned to face her. That was different. That was protecting someone who needed help. Being a deputy means enforcing the law, even when it's not clear what's right. "Isn't that true of any path we choose?" Delia asked. "Life rarely presents us with clear distinctions between right and wrong." She was perceptive, this Boston schoolteacher who had survived the harsh journey west. Nathan found himself drawn to her intelligence as much as to her beauty. "What about you?" he asked, changing the subject. "Will you work in your uncle's store or seek a teaching position?" Delia smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Both, perhaps. I spoke with Mrs. Thornton, the schoolmistress, today. She's overwhelmed with new students and would welcome my help." and Uncle Walter says he only needs me in the store during the busiest times. Sounds like you're settling in well, Nathan observed, ignoring the twinge of something that felt suspiciously like jealousy at the thought of Delia building a life in Silver Creek without him. I think I could be happy here, she admitted. It's not Boston, but there's something honest about this place, something real. She hesitated, then added quietly, especially if certain people decided to stay as well. Her meaning was clear, and Nathan felt his heart quicken. He'd known Delia Montgomery for all of 2 days, yet somehow she had breached the walls he'd built around himself since the war. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Delia, he began, not sure what he was going to say. Before he could continue, a gunshot shattered the night, followed by shouts and more gunfire. Nathan was at the window in an instant, peering out into the darkness. At the far end of Main Street, he could see flashes of gunfire and the orange glow of flames. "Stay here," he ordered Delia, already reaching for his gun belt. "Nathan, wait," she cried, grabbing his arm. "It's too dangerous. I have to help," he said. "Harker's men must have slipped past the lookouts somehow." Walter appeared in the doorway, hastily dressed and clutching a shotgun. "What's happening?" "Sounds like Harker's made his move," Nathan replied grimly. "Get Delia to the church with the other women and children. I'll head to the sheriff's office." Walter nodded, his face pale but determined. "Be careful, son." Nathan paused, struck by the term of endearment from a man he barely knew. Then he nodded, gave Delia's hand a quick squeeze, and was out the door, running toward the sound of gunfire. Main Street was in chaos. Several buildings at the far end were ablaze, their windows shattered, flames licking at the night sky. Men on horseback galloped through town, firing randomly at buildings and anyone unfortunate enough to be caught in the open. Sheriff Brooks and a handful of townsmen were returning fire from behind makeshift barricades, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Nathan took cover behind a water trough, assessing the situation. He counted at least 8 riders, possibly more hidden in the smoke and darkness. Brooks was pinned down near the sheriff's office, bleeding from what appeared to be a shoulder wound. Making a decision, Nathan moved swiftly from cover to cover, working his way toward Brooks. A bullet splintered the wood of a hitching post inches from his head, but he kept moving, staying low. "Drake," Brooks called when he spotted him. "Harker came in from the north where we least expected him. Bastard must have circled around through the hills." "How bad are you hit?" Nathan asked, eyeing the blood-soaked sleeve of the sheriff's shirt. "Just a graze," Brooks insisted, though his pallor suggested otherwise. "But Thompson's dead, and Wilson's not much better off." Nathan looked to where a man lay motionless near the steps of the sheriff's office, another slumped against the wall, clutching his side. "We need to get these men to safety," Nathan said, "and then coordinate a counterattack. Harker's men are scattered, focused on looting and destruction. That gives us an advantage if we can organize." Brooks nodded, then winced at the movement. "There's a tunnel from the jail cellar to the back of the church. Built it last year when we had that trouble with the Donovan gang. We can get the wounded through there." Working quickly, Nathan helped Brooks to his feet and supported him as they made their way to the wounded Wilson. Between them, they managed to get the injured man into the sheriff's office and down to the cellar, where a trapdoor revealed a narrow tunnel lit by wall-mounted lanterns. "I'll take Wilson through," Brooks said. "You organize the men. Deputy's badge is in my desk drawer if you want it." Nathan hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'll see what I can do." Back on the street, Nathan moved from one group of defenders to another, organizing them into a more effective force. Some he stationed on rooftops as snipers, others he positioned at strategic points along Main Street. The remaining men he formed into a mobile group that could respond quickly to wherever they were needed most. The battle raged for what seemed like hours, though in reality it was probably less than one. Harker's men, discovering that Silver Creek wasn't the easy target they'd expected, began to retreat, taking what loot they could carry and leaving their dead behind. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the smoking ruins of several buildings, Nathan stood in the middle of Main Street, surveying the damage. 3 townsmen were dead, several more wounded. But thanks to the warning and preparations, most of the town had been spared, and the majority of women and children were safe in the church. Walter found him there, shotgun still in hand, his face smudged with soot but otherwise unharmed. "Delia's safe," he said, answering Nathan's unspoken question. "She's helping tend the wounded at the church." Nathan nodded, relief washing over him. "Harker escaped from what I hear," Walter replied, "but he left half his men behind, either dead or too wounded to ride." "He'll be back," Nathan said grimly. "Men like Harker don't give up easily." Walter studied him for a moment. "You're wearing the badge," he observed, nodding to the deputy's star pinned to Nathan's vest. Nathan touched it absently. He'd taken it from Brooks's desk as promised, pinning it on without much thought in the heat of battle. Now, in the cold light of dawn, he wondered if it had been the right choice. "Sheriff Brooks needs the help," he said simply. "And it gives you a reason to stay in Silver Creek," Walter added, a knowing look in his eyes. Before Nathan could respond, a commotion at the edge of town drew their attention. A group of riders was approaching too many to be Harker's men returning and moving too openly. As they drew closer, Nathan recognized James Hartley at the head of the group, leading a dozen armed ranch hands. "Heard the shooting from the ranch," Hartley explained as he dismounted. "Would have been here sooner, but we had to gather the men. Looks like we missed the action." "Not all of it," Nathan replied. "Harker escaped. He'll be regrouping, planning his next move." Hartley nodded grimly. "Then we'll be ready for him." He glanced at the badge on Nathan's chest, raising an eyebrow. "Deputy Drake, is it now?" "Temporary," Nathan said, though even as he spoke, he wondered if that was true. "Well, my men and I are at your disposal, Deputy," Hartley said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Just tell us where you need us." With Hartley's men bolstering their forces, the town organized search parties to track Harker and his remaining gang members. Nathan, despite having been awake all night, led one such party into the hills north of town. Following a trail of blood that suggested at least one of the bandits was severely wounded. By midday, they had found and captured two of Harker's men, both too injured to put up much resistance. From them, they learned that Harker was planning to rendezvous with another gang to the south before making a second attempt on Silver Creek. "He's fixated on this town now," one of the captured men said, grimacing as the doctor probed his bullet wound. "Said he wouldn't stop until every building was burned to the ground." "Why?" Nathan demanded. "What's so special about Silver Creek?" The man laughed, a harsh sound that ended in a cough. "It's not about the town, it's about you, Drake. You killed his brother in that first ambush, and Jeb Harker doesn't forget a blood debt." Nathan absorbed this information silently. If true, it meant he had brought this danger to Silver Creek, to Walter, to Delia. The very people he had come to care about were now targets because of him. When he returned to town, he found Sheriff Brooks in the church, his arm properly bandaged and in a sling, but otherwise looking better than he had during the night. "Got something to tell you, Sheriff," Nathan said, pulling him aside from the bustling activity of the makeshift hospital. He related what the captured bandit had told him, watching Brooks's expression change from concern to grim understanding. "So that's it," Brooks said when Nathan had finished. "It's a personal vendetta." "Seems that way," Nathan agreed, "which means I should leave town." "Draw Harker away from Silver Creek." Brooks shook his head firmly. "That's exactly what Harker wants, to isolate you, make you vulnerable. No, Drake, our best chance is to stand together." "He'll come back with more men," Nathan argued. "More people will die because of me." "People will die if you leave too," Brooks countered. "You think Harker will believe we didn't help you, that we didn't give you shelter, food, a horse? No, he'll burn this town regardless. At least with you here, we have a fighting chance." Nathan wasn't convinced, but before he could argue further, Delia approached, her face pale with fatigue but her eyes bright with purpose. "Nathan," she said, relief evident in her voice, "you're back safely." "For now," he replied, unable to keep the bitterness from his tone. Delia looked between him and the sheriff, sensing the tension. "What's happened?" Sheriff Brooks excused himself tactfully, leaving Nathan to explain the situation to Delia. As he spoke, he watched her expression change from concern to horror, and finally to a determination that matched his own. "So you see," he concluded, "I need to leave. It's the only way to keep Silver Creek, to keep you safe." "No," Delia said firmly, her hands clenched at her sides. Running away solves nothing. Harker will still come after the town, and you'll be alone without allies. I can take care of myself, Nathan insisted. Like you took care of me, Delia challenged. Would you have survived Harker's ambush if you'd been alone, or would you have died out there in the desert with no one to mourn your passing? The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. He hadn't considered it that way. His instinct had always been to move on when trouble found him, to protect others by removing himself from their lives. But Delia was right, sometimes survival meant standing your ground, fighting alongside those who stood with you. This isn't your battle, he said, a final, weak protest. It became my battle the moment Harker attacked my town, Delia replied, and it became our battle when you found me on that desert road. She stepped closer, reaching up to touch the deputy's badge on his vest. You've already made your choice, Nathan. You're not alone anymore. Looking into her clear blue eyes, Nathan felt something shift inside him, a wall crumbling, a door opening to possibilities he had long since abandoned. Delia Montgomery had walked into his life 2 days ago, yet somehow she had come to represent everything he had been running from and everything he now found himself wanting. All right, he said finally. We'll face Harker together. But I want you and the other women and children moved to Hartley's ranch for safety. It's more defensible than the town. Delia started to protest, but Nathan held up a hand. This isn't negotiable, Delia. I can't focus on stopping Harker if I'm worried about your safety every minute. She studied his face for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. Fine, but promise me one thing. What's that? Promise me you'll still be here when it's over, she said softly. That you won't use this as an excuse to disappear once Harker is dealt with. Nathan hesitated, aware that she was asking for more than just his physical presence. She was asking for a commitment, a promise that he would try to build something lasting here in Silver Creek with her. I promise, he said finally, the words feeling both terrifying and right. When this is over, we'll talk about the future, our future. The smile that lit up Delia's face was like the sun breaking through storm clouds, and Nathan found himself smiling in return, despite the danger that loomed over them. The next 2 days were a flurry of activity as Silver Creek prepared for Harker's return. Women and children, along with the elderly and injured, were relocated to Hartley's ranch, which was transformed into a fortress with armed men patrolling its perimeter. In town, barricades were strengthened, ammunition stockpiled, and every able-bodied man given a specific role in the town's defense. Nathan worked alongside Sheriff Brooks, who was recovering quickly despite the doctor's orders to rest. Together, they coordinated the town's defenses, placing sharpshooters on rooftops and setting up crossfire zones that would catch any attackers in a deadly hail of bullets. On the evening of the second day, as Nathan was checking the eastern barricade, Walter Montgomery approached, carrying a rifle and wearing a determined expression. Thought you'd be at the ranch with Delia and the others, Nathan said, surprised to see him. Walter shook his head. My place is here. This store, he gestured to the building behind them, was built by my father. I've spent my entire life here, and I'm not about to let some outlaw burn it to the ground without a fight. Nathan nodded, understanding the sentiment. Delia knows you stayed behind. She wasn't happy about it, Walter admitted with a wry smile. That niece of mine has quite a temper when she's riled. Reminds me of her mother. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She cares for you, you know, Walter said suddenly. More than she should, perhaps, given how short a time you've known each other. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. Walter, no, let me finish, the older man interrupted. Life out here is uncertain, Nathan, we both know that. People come and go, and sometimes they don't get the chance to say what needs saying. He looked Nathan square in the eye. Delia has lost too much already. If you don't feel the same way about her, you need to tell her now before things go any further. And if I do feel the same way. Nathan asked quietly. Walter's expression softened. Then you'd better survive what's coming, because that girl deserves some happiness after all she's been through. Before Nathan could respond, a shout from the lookout posted on the church steeple drew their attention. Riders approaching from the south, at least 20 men. The warning spread quickly through town, and men rushed to their assigned positions. Nathan checked his revolvers, making sure they were fully loaded, then climbed to the roof of the general store for a better view. In the fading light, he could make out a cloud of dust on the southern road, kicked up by approaching horsemen. They were still some distance away, but closing fast. "This is it," he murmured to himself, a strange calm settling over him. He had faced death many times before during the war, in skirmishes with hostile tribes, in the harsh wilderness where one mistake could be fatal. But this time felt different. This time, he had something to live for. As darkness fell, the defenders of Silver Creek waited in tense silence, weapons ready. The only sounds were the creak of wooden buildings settling and the occasional cough or murmured instruction. Nathan moved among the men, offering quiet encouragement and last-minute advice. The attack, when it came, was not what they had expected. Instead of charging directly into town, Harker's men split into smaller groups, approaching from multiple directions simultaneously. They used the darkness to their advantage, keeping low and moving from cover to cover. "They're trying to flank us," Nathan called out, spotting the maneuver from his elevated position. "Wilson, take your men to the east side. Jackson, reinforce the west." The night erupted in gunfire, muzzle flashes illuminating the darkness like lightning. Nathan fired carefully, making each shot count, taking down one of Harker's men who had gotten too bold in his approach. For what seemed like hours, the battle raged, neither side gaining a clear advantage. The defenders had the benefit of prepared positions and knowledge of the terrain, while the attackers had superior numbers and the element of surprise. Nathan was just reloading his revolver when a movement caught his eye, a figure darting between buildings on the north side of town, heading toward the rear of Montgomery's store. With a sickening certainty, he realized it was Jeb Harker himself, recognizable even in the darkness by his distinctive hat and the way he favored his left side, the result, Nathan guessed, of a wound from their previous encounter. "Walter," Nathan shouted, scrambling down from his position. "Harker's heading for your store." He ran through the streets, dodging bullets and leaping over debris from damaged buildings. As he rounded the corner behind the general store, he saw Harker attempting to force the back door, a can of kerosene in one hand, a match in the other. "Harker." Nathan called, his revolvers aimed squarely at the outlaw's back. "It's over." Harker froze, then slowly turned, his face twisted in a sneer. "Drake, finally face to face, you killed my brother." "Your brother tried to kill me and an innocent woman," Nathan replied evenly. "He made his choice." "And now you'll make yours," Harker said, his voice dangerously calm. "Drop your guns, or I burn this place to the ground with everyone in it." To emphasize his point, he struck the match against the doorframe, holding the small flame perilously close to the kerosene can. Nathan hesitated, calculating his options. He could shoot Harker, but the outlaw might still have time to drop the burning match, igniting the kerosene and potentially killing anyone inside the store, including Walter, who had been coordinating the defense from there. "What's it going to be, Drake?" Harker taunted. "Your life or theirs." The decision was made for him when a shot rang out from inside the store, the bullet splintering the wood of the door inches from Harker's head. The outlaw jerked in surprise, dropping both the match and the kerosene can. Nathan didn't waste the opportunity. He fired twice, hitting Harker in the chest. The outlaw staggered backward, a look of shock on his face before collapsing to the ground. The store's back door opened, revealing Walter Montgomery, shotgun in hand. "Thought you might need some help," he said calmly. Nathan nodded, moving forward to check Harker. The outlaw was still breathing, but barely, blood soaking his shirt front. "It's not over," Harker gasped, his eyes glazing over. "My men will finish what I started." "Your men are either dead or running," Nathan told him. "Silver Creek stands, Harker. You lost." Harker's eyes widened slightly, then went dull and fixed as the last breath left his body. Around town, the shooting was already diminishing as word spread that Harker had fallen. Without their leader, the remaining attackers lost heart, retreating into the darkness or surrendering to the defenders. By dawn, it was over. Silver Creek had survived, though not without cost. 5 townsmen had died defending their homes and many more were wounded. Several buildings had been damaged by fire or gunfire, and the streets were littered with debris and bodies. But the town still stood, and as the sun rose, people began to emerge from their defensive positions, dazed but alive. Sheriff Brooks found Nathan sitting on the steps of the general store, his face streaked with gunpowder and sweat, a bloodied bandage wrapped around his left arm where a bullet had grazed him. "It's done," Brooks said, sitting heavily beside him. "Harker's dead, and we've captured 8 of his men." "The rest scattered," Nathan nodded wearily. "They won't be back, not without Harker to lead them." "Thanks to you," Brooks said. "Town owes you a debt, Drake." "I just did what needed doing," Nathan replied, echoing his words from days earlier. Brooks smiled slightly. "Well, what needs doing now is getting the women and children back from Hartley's ranch and starting the cleanup. And then," he added, his smile widening, "I believe I owe you a proper swearing in as deputy. That is, if you still want the job." Nathan looked out at the town coming back to life around him, people clearing debris, helping the wounded, comforting those who had lost loved ones. It wasn't the life he had imagined for himself when he rode into Silver Creek just days ago, but somehow it felt right. "I want the job," he said finally. "Silver Creek is home now." The word felt strange on his tongue. Home. It had been so long since he'd had one or wanted one. But as he watched Walter directing the cleanup efforts, as he thought of Delia waiting anxiously at the ranch, Nathan realized that home wasn't a place. It was people. It was belonging. Later that day, a wagon train arrived from Hartley's ranch, bringing back the women and children who had been evacuated. Nathan stood on Main Street, watching as families reunited, searching the crowd for one face in particular. And then she was there, running toward him, heedless of propriety or her still healing ankle. Delia threw herself into his arms and Nathan caught her, holding her tight against him as if he might never let go. "You're alive," she breathed, pulling back just enough to examine his face, her hands touching his cheeks, his shoulders, as if to reassure herself he was real. "When we heard the shooting from the ranch, I was so afraid. I made a promise," Nathan reminded her. "Said I'd still be here when it was over." Tears welled in Delia's eyes, but she was smiling. "Yes, you did. And now that it is over, I believe we were going to talk about the future, our future." Nathan glanced around at the battered but unbowed town, at the people who had fought alongside him, who had accepted him despite knowing him for only days. Then he looked back at Delia, whose courage and spirit had awakened something in him he'd thought long dead. "I don't need to talk about it," he said simply. "I already know what I want." And there, in the middle of Main Street, with half the town watching, Nathan Drake kissed Delia Montgomery, a kiss that spoke of endings and beginnings, of journeys completed and journeys yet to undertake. When they finally broke apart, breathless and smiling, Walter was there, beaming like a proud father. "About time," he said gruffly, though his eyes were suspiciously bright. In the weeks that followed, Silver Creek rebuilt what had been damaged in the attack. Nathan settled into his role as deputy, finding that the badge suited him better than he'd expected. He had a knack for keeping the peace, for mediating disputes before they escalated, and for tracking down the occasional troublemaker who passed through town. Delia divided her time between teaching at the school and helping at the store, her natural warmth and intelligence making her beloved by students and townsfolk alike. She and Nathan courted properly, taking Sunday afternoon walks, attending socials at the church, and enjoying quiet evenings on Walter's porch. 3 months after the battle with Harker's gang, on a crisp autumn day with leaves turning gold and red on the trees around Silver Creek, Nathan asked Delia to marry him. He did it privately, during one of their walks along the creek that gave the town its name, offering her his mother's ring that he'd carried with him all these years, never expecting to have a reason to give it to anyone. Delia's yes was immediate and tearful, and when they returned to town hand in hand, the news spread faster than wildfire. Walter insisted on hosting an engagement dinner that very night, and James and Sarah Hartley rode in from the ranch to join the celebration. As Nathan looked around the table at these people who had become his family in such a short time, He marveled at the twist of fate that had brought him to this moment. If he hadn't been riding that particular stretch of desert road on that particular day, if he hadn't found Delia abandoned and in need, if he hadn't stopped to help her. Life was full of such moments. He realized crossroads where a single decision could change everything. He had spent years drifting, believing he had nothing left to give, nothing worth staying for. But in helping Delia, in giving her what little he thought he had to offer, Nathan had somehow found everything he never knew he wanted. The wedding took place in spring, when the desert bloomed with wildflowers and Silver Creek was at its most beautiful. The entire town turned out for the occasion, the church packed to overflowing as Nathan Drake, once a drifter with no ties to hold him, pledged himself to Delia Montgomery for life. Sheriff Brooks stood as Nathan's best man, while Walter proudly gave the bride away. Mrs. Abernathy wept openly throughout the ceremony, and even James Hartley was seen to wipe away a suspicious moisture from his eyes as the couple exchanged vows. Afterward, the celebration spilled into the street, with tables laden with food, music from fiddles and harmonicas filling the air, and dancing that continued well into the night. Nathan and Delia moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes, their happiness evident to all who saw them. "Happy?" Nathan asked his bride as they shared a quiet moment away from the festivities. Delia's smile was radiant. "More than I ever thought possible, and you?" Nathan looked at the woman who had changed his life, who had shown him that his heart wasn't as empty as he'd believed, that he still had so much to give and receive. "I found everything I never knew I was looking for," he said simply, "when I found you by that desert road." Their kiss sealed a promise made not just in words before a preacher, but in actions over the months. They had known each other, a promise to face whatever came together, to build a life filled with purpose and love, to never take for granted the miracle of having found each other. And as Silver Creek grew and prospered in the years that followed, as Nathan and Delia welcomed children of their own and watched them grow, as they weathered storms both literal and figurative, they never forgot how it all began with a man who believed he had nothing left to give, and a woman abandoned by the road who helped him discover just how wrong he was.